Thank you for tuning in to the Daily Conditioning Podcast. In this episode, we discuss how programming affects our ability to change our mindset. Please give us your thoughts and don't forget to like and subscribe.
All right, Osh, did you know that the month of January is named after a Roman god named Janus? All right, so the ancient Romans imagined Janus as a two-faced god, one facing forward and one facing back. This symbolized his ability to look forward and backward at the same time. With that being said, do you think it's important to look back or reflect on our past in order to learn for our future, or should we always remain forward thinking?
Well, you should remain in the present. And the only way to really improve in the present moment is you have to, when I say look in the past, it's take the value of the experience from the past. If you can exist in the present moment by understanding the things you've experienced in your past and extrapolate the value from it without the emotional attachment, then you can use that information to kind of get you where you need to be now. And when you work on now, that's the only time you can ever work on anything. That will improve your future. Listen, the month people get hung up on New Year's resolutions to start. It's a new beginning, right? That's the idea, because of, someone arbitrarily set a 12-month calendar and then call this one January and call this one this, and you do whatever the reason, it doesn't matter. As opposed to making a new year resolution, I would prefer to call it a new now resolution, in the sense where you're looking at something in your life, in your existence, that you're unhappy with, or something that you see there's a potential for change, and you actuate it by changing your mindset, by doing things differently. And you use your past experience, if you will, what your knowledge, at least your own experience, to say, all right, this didn't work for me. I'm unhappy with this because I did this thing a certain way. So I want to make a change. Now, you don't have to know necessarily all the steps. You just have to first identify that you want to make a change. The steps will unfold on their own if you put your mindset to say, this is the person I want to be. And in this day and age, and nowadays, and we talked about it in the last episode, there's the resources are out there for us to find those things. But the first step, if you will, is you got to develop that mindset. And you have to, or actually, before you develop the mindset, actually, the first step is you have to know that you want to change. You have to realize that. And I think that comes from that degree of discomfort, or unhappiness rather, not discomfort, unhappiness with your present situation. When you look at your unhappiness in your present situation is a byproduct of your past actions. So you can look at your past actions and say, not to dwell on them, and be like, I did this, this, and this, and this is where I'm at. I'm not happy with where I'm at. So how do I change it so I can get the person I want to be tomorrow or next week or next month?
Looking back on the past allows us to study the nature of ourselves and helps us recognize why we do what we do. So is it important not to look too much into the past or keep your mind there for too long? Because you can easily be trapped. This is a statement that was mentioned further down this article by the Washington Post. Do you think that it's dangerous to look in the past just as much as it does good for us?
Yes and no. I know that that's a cop out, it may sound like, but it's not so cut and dry to answer it that way. Like I said, it's good to look in the past and say, this didn't work for me, and I know I want to do this now. But if you look to the past with an emotional attachment, meaning like, I did this thing, and this is the reason why I had this trauma, I had this bad thing happen to me, and this is why I'm like this. That can be a hindrance for you to move forward or to progress. When I say move forward, let me rephrase it. It's not move forward, it's progress, because that is where you want to be in every moment, is progression. You don't want to be looking towards the back and saying, all right, that's who I am, and that's what I can't be anything more than that. Looking towards the past, when you're extrapolating the value from it, that's where it's good. Looking at the past and then you're not taking the value out because you're still hanging on to that emotional attachment, that's the bad part. That's where it's not going to let you progress. That's essentially what wisdom is. Wisdom is knowledge of a past experience absent of the emotional attachment. When you can get to that point, you can look at something in the past and say, this didn't work for me, or I reacted this way and it wasn't beneficial towards me. Now I can make the change. When you do that, and here's the thing, I mentioned it before. So you see the unhappiness of a past decision, you make the mindset to change, then you accomplish the habits that develop the change. You don't have to go back anymore. You're not that person anymore. That mindset has been dropped. You've replaced a negative or a non-productive mindset or programming, if you will. You dropped a negative programming and you replaced it with a positive programming. That's the whole process. That's really what it is. You're taking, and this comes out of different levels of different schools of thought in psychology, where you're having a mindset that you have in place, a programming, if you will. Let's go with a programming. Your programming is to eat a certain way. I'm just using that as an example because it's easy to understand. Eat a certain way. That programming for that eating or that diet does not suit you. So you have to remove that that programming and replace it with a better program. That's the process that could be difficult. That's where the challenge is. And once you overcome that, and now that you've instilled this new program and it's hardened, it's hardwired in your brain, and your body and everything is following suit, you don't have to look back there to go there and be like, oh, well, I used to be like this, and that's why I'm like this. Not more than you have to just explain to someone. If someone asks you, hey, why are you like this? Well, yeah, that's the way I am now. I don't have to explain it. I don't have to go back there and revisit why I'm here. I'm here. So when you're here, you don't have to go back and say, well, I suffered and this is all the other things. And that's why, unless you're doing it in a way that's kind of showing someone else who's in a similar situation that you were in, like an empathetic situation, empathetic idea or concept that you're saying, hey, I know where you are because I was there and I got past it and it was a challenge, but with the right support structure, with the right plan, with the right techniques, you can get past it. It's going to be a little bit, there's going to be a little bit of discomfort, there's going to be a little bit of pain, but you can do it.
You know, that being said, you mentioned that some of us, we carry our emotional attachment to something, not allowing ourselves to move forward. Can you give me an example? Because when I hear that, I'm thinking something traumatic. It could be a breakup, could be a divorce, it could be financial.
It's really a concept of learning. We learn, whatever we adopt into our programming comes from a variety of different methods of learning, whether it's trying and failing at something, or, experiential learning. I did it, it didn't work, so I did it this way, and this worked for me, so I'm going to keep doing it that way, and that's my program, right? The other thing, there's an emotional method of learning where you can have some type of trauma, you can have some type of positive emotional experience, and then automatically an idea becomes adopted into you, that program becomes adopted into your mindset, and that's the way things are going to be. A lot of the time, people refer to it as negative trauma. We have a negative trauma that occurs, and now we've become anchored in that emotional attachment. It becomes part of our identity, part of our programming. Not to go too far into the details of how all that stuff works, the idea is this: it becomes part of your programming. You can control your programming. You can change, you can adapt it, but depending on the level of emotional attachment and how deeply rooted it is into your programming, it could be a little bit more difficult to change some of those things. An emotional attachment could be something like, breaking up from a relationship, from a spouse, from a girlfriend or a boyfriend, someone that you were spending a lot of time with. There is a process there as well for moving on from that, letting go of that emotional attachment so that you can move on and progress in your own right. The main thing you got to look at when it comes to emotional attachments for the past is, if the emotional attachment that you've had to something is limiting your progress or limiting your happiness, then you really need to analyze that and find a way to move on from it, to let it go. Because anything in the past, not anything, let me rephrase that. Every single thing in the past does not exist anymore. An action, even yourself, that version of you a year ago is not the same person that's sitting now physically. You're physically a different person. So you have to change and you have to adapt and you have to progress. It's very difficult to progress when you're still hanging on to things that don't exist anymore, that are holding you back. And with some of those emotional attachments, it can be difficult for a lot of people. And I'm not saying it's something you just gotta, hey, forget it, be robotic about it. We have emotions, we have feelings, but the first step in getting on that road to realizing that, the first step to getting on the road to getting past those emotional attachments is to identify that they don't serve you anymore, to identify that they're hurting you. The first step would be to identify that they're hurting you. The next step is how do I get past it? That's where you have therapy, you have coaching, you have different methods that you have to try to take your strength back, to own your own condition again.
You mentioned their steps, making it sound pretty easy, I'm not gonna lie. So I have to ask, on a micro scale, do you have steps that you follow as far as detaching yourself or to overcome these obstacles that you've mentioned?
Like I said, first you have to identify, you have to come to the realization that this emotional attachment is the hindrance for you. The only way you can identify something as a hindrance, you have to be looking for it. You have to know that you're unhappy and be willing to find a way to make yourself happy. So there are a lot of people that are hardened in their unhappiness, meaning they identify that, like I'm an angry person. That's just how, don't take my anger away, people will say. Or that's just the way I am. I'm like this. This is my ethnicity. This is the place I grew up this way. You're not going to go in there and change that person. A person has to be willing to change first. So when they identify the steps, now here's the thing. The mind is in charge of the body. The body should be the subject of the mind. Now the mind should be the subject of your spirit, your emotional not your emotional sense, your spiritual, your higher self, your infinite intelligence. So when the mind gets this programming in there that's taking that connection away from your spiritual self, then you kind of got to go a little bit higher than the mind, and that's where you kind of have to make that connection. It's kind of complicated because you have to have this understanding of faith, you have to understand of that aspect of your life, and be willing to let go of your intellectual tie to where you are, because the intellect is a tool, and it can be, depending on your mindset and what your beliefs are and what your knowings are, you're going to use your intellect to keep you wherever that wants you to go. Okay. And when I really am deferring to the ego is where your suffering lies. That's where it all is, because it wants to be justified. The thing is, the ego is very smart in using the intellect to say, you deserve to be here. You're justified in being angry. And the thing is, it's right. If a person did a mean thing to you, a terrible thing to you, you're right in hating that person. You're 100% justified in hating that person. But it does not improve your condition. It does not make you feel better. So the next step, and this is the rub for the ego. This is very hard for ego. Forgiveness. You have to forgive that incident. You have to forgive that offender. You have to forgive yourself. Because if you don't, you're just going to carry this burden that technically doesn't weigh anything. You can't weigh it. You can't. There's no matter. There's no mass. It doesn't. It's not in the present moment. It's in the present mind, but it's from the past. It doesn't exist anymore. Transcending the mind and the ego and getting to the point where you can access that spiritual part of yourself, that infinite part of yourself, to say, all right, I got to let this go because it's holding me back. The greatest litmus test in the world for any of that is the way you feel. The way you feel. If you're feeling anxiety or anger or fear about any particular topic, then you know that you've lost control of that. And you're giving that control to something else, another thing, another force, another idea. There's a saying that the victim carries the trauma with them long after the offender is gone. It's hard. It's not something that's easy, but it's one of those things where when you have to realize it's possible to do and you can do it. If you say you can't, then you've already condemned yourself to suffer with it for the rest of your life. So understanding that the possibility for you to overcome it is there, and being able to do that, and you can find there are resources plenty that are out there. There are healers, there are coaches, there are therapists, there's psychiatry, there's all kinds of stuff that but ultimately you have to make that final connection. You're the one who has to make the decision to go. Everyone else isn't doing it for you. They're guiding you, they're helping you, they're showing you a way, but you have to come to terms with it, and you have to do it.
I'm glad you've mentioned pieces or parts that make a really good support system. The American Psychological Association, for instance, quoted their survey. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 was a great deal of stress and 1 was little or no stress, a 2015 survey found that the average stress level for people with emotional support in place was 5 out of 10 compared to 6.3 out of 10 for people without emotional support or a good support system. Again, this was the American Psychological Association. All right, and some steps to really mitigate a lot of this is to, 1, reach out to family and friends, use technology, connect with people who share your interest, look for peer support, or simply ask for help. You mentioned a lot of resources out there. So Ash, what makes a good support system?
1, you have to have people you can trust. And there's degrees of who you can talk to and how you can talk to. Sometimes it may be difficult for you to talk to people that you're very, very close with, because they know you too well sometimes, and they kind of already have, whether they realize it or not, they already have judgments, they already have ideas about you. So, and you got to be careful who you talk to, because a lot of people, when they're giving you advice, they're telling you what they would do, not what you should do. Right. And it's difficult. So people get turned off by talking to people about stuff. So, and then the other part of it too, is you got to know who to go to and how to go to them. Because, and then you got to know who to tell and who not to tell. Meaning, if you have a spouse or a girlfriend, boyfriend, or a close friend, and you've known this person for a long time, you spend a lot of time with them, but you go to a therapist instead. And they're like, well, why didn't you come and talk to me? Well, I just wanted to talk to someone else because I just feel more comfortable talking to someone who doesn't know me so well. Part of that good support structure is, 1, having trust, knowing people that you can talk to, can go to. But the bottom line is this: you have to be able to find someone or find something that you can use. Now, one of the things you mentioned, use technology. Technology is very important too, because nowadays you're not just isolated, you're not just limited to the people you know or people you work with or your friends. You can be like, listen, I want to find, just us being in the military, there's tons of resources that they have, whether it's the VA, military, one source, a lot of really, really good programs out there for veterans and for soldiers and service members that could say, I need to talk to somebody. And sometimes having that good support structure, being able to talk to people, being able to, communicate with someone is good. Sometimes just getting something off your chest is all you need. You just need someone to listen and someone to, give you a north and south, a up and down, shake your head up and down, saying, I know what you're going through, man. I'll be there for you if you need anything else. So that's really good having that. But you have to have the willingness to talk. You have to have the willingness to let people know kind of where you are and be able to find the right resources that you need. If you talk to someone and they're kind of giving you something, you're not really crazy about the feedback, then go talk to someone else. They just may not know. They just don't understand what you're going through. Or they just don't know how to cope with it, or they just don't have any techniques.
And this really honestly goes both ways here. I think that a really good resolution would be to be that person that helps others, right? That connect with people that you think need help or, might need a little bit of support. So I definitely think this is a two-way street here. So with that being said, one of the most toxic traits that one can have is complaining. One of our resolutions should always be to maybe complain less. Ash, is there ever a really good time to complain? Is there a moment where complaining is justified?
Okay, so all complaining is justified to an extent, because again, it goes back to that egoic mindset where you feel wronged or something happened that you didn't want to happen. It could be justified 100%. If someone cuts you off in traffic, are you right to complain? Are you justified to complain that person cut you off? Person yell and scream? Of course, right, you are. Does it suit you? Does it benefit you? Not really, not in the long term. This is what I wrote about complaining. A complaint should be like a breath, in and out, because holding on to either one for too long doesn't serve you very well. That's the idea with complaining. It's natural. You can't. You're not going. No, very few people are going to be so at that level of stoic, unless they do a full ego extraction, right? That they're going to be able to just, hey, somebody does something terrible to them, or they witness something terrible and absolutely have no complaint about in the world. The idea is don't hang on to it. The idea is whenever those things happen, you have a natural chemical reaction in your body, if you will, that are going to spike. Your adrenaline's going to go up. You're going to get angry. All those things, you got to just let them kind of pass on their own. Don't keep stoking the fire. Let those feelings go. Put your attention somewhere else and keep it moving. Because here's the thing. That type of complaining it's contagious in your own mind. You start to justify now. I'm using this justification method to placate my ego and say I'm justified to be angry all the time. This guy's cutting me off. And here's the thing. If you're always in a complaining mode, you're always going to find things to complain about, because that's your mindset. That's what you're going to start attracting into your day every single day. I'm going to go to work today and I know 10 people are going to cut me off. No, 20 people are going to cut you off now because you're expecting it. That's your mindset. You have to get into the mode of stop complaining when it comes to that thing. And the other side of complaining is people who sit and complain about other people's success, criticizing other people's success, complaining about someone else's progress to justify your own complacency. That's a dangerous way to get in, because you're accelerating your regression. Now you're saying, I don't want to do this because this other person's doing it, and the way they're doing it is wrong, so I don't want to do that, or whatever it may be. Or putting your energy, instead of working on your own stuff, you're putting your energy into telling the world, or telling yourself rather, not the world. You're telling yourself why this person is wrong.
In Dr. Lisa Varvogly's blog, where she specializes in writing about mental health and why complaining is toxic for you, specifically, she writes complaining rewires your brain for negativity and unhappiness. And within this blog, she writes that complaining is really one-sided, seeing the negative, focusing on the problem, pinpointing what didn't go well, finding fault with everything, and getting stuck feeling upset about all the things you can't control is a surefire way to create a gloomy world for yourself. Complaining is not just a manifestation of a pessimist, but it's also a manifesto of the unwillingness to register the positives that coexist with the negatives. The way I see it, Ash, is that perhaps people just are unwilling to take the high road whenever something happens to them. You mentioned that a seasoned lifer, I would say, could probably extract all the negatives in their life and maybe never complain. But I think that it's a bit more. I think it's easier. I think the average person can make that decision to just take the hybrid. I honestly, I don't see a true validation for any complaint if it's just an everyday occurrence, right? If it's just a random thing that happens to you, like someone cuts you off in your example, sure, you can complain, you have the right to complain, but to literally complain about it, to get out of your car, cause road rage, that is when it becomes sort of that extreme where I'm just like, is this worth it? Ash, I don't think it is.
So there's different levels, kind of, which kind of woven into that discussion. So what Dr. Ravogli said, what she was talking about is you're essentially creating a habit of complaining, and the type of complaining where she's talking about, which I gather from her quote there, is that if you're always in the mode of complaining about other people, the thing we were talking about, the road rage incident, that's like an instantaneous, guttural reaction to something that happened to you. And that's kind of normal to complain about it in the sense like, I can't believe this guy did this to me. I can't believe this person is like that. Okay, cool. And you just let it go. That's my point. You get it in and out, let it go. Other people turn it into a sport where everything is complaining. You're a sports fan, right? Yeah. Someone will sit there and watch a game and they'll be like, this guy's an idiot. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. Complain. They do that all the time in the sport world. Now, people do that. Go to a bar, go to a restaurant, just listen to a conversation that people are having and listen to the things that they talk about. What are they complaining about? They complain about the weather. They complain about the traffic. You're in a constant mode, and it seems mundane, but these are habitual. That's a habitual complainer. What are you you're complaining? You're essentially allowing all of these conditions around you to condition you, as opposed to you conditioning yourself to be unconditional to those conditions. So you're complaining about the weather. You're complaining about the traffic. You're complaining about the food. You're complaining about this. Anything that happens, you're finding a reason to be unhappy. That's your mindset. And you're going to keep perpetuating things that are going to, listen, everything exists in either light or shadow. You can't have shadow without light, right? An indication of a shadow, the shadow is the indication of light. So you can either look at the shadow or you can look at the light. Every situation that occurs, there is a way to perceive it in a positive light or in a negative light. Some of it's a lot harder to find some of that positive stuff. Okay. But the idea is you don't have to go out and just complainers, those habitual complainers are finding things that aren't even present in their existence. They're just, this is this. Oh, people are nasty. People are mean. People are this. I can't believe this person did that. Oh, did you see what this person did? Like, who cares? Who cares? That's the idea is, what is that? How is that benefiting you? In their mind, the complainer mindset is they feel justified in trying to correct other people. It's this false sense of righteousness that I'm right and they're wrong. And when you get into that mode, you're not doing anything for yourself. If your job is to go around and look to see what everyone else is doing wrong, how is that benefiting you? Why don't you just focus on what you want to do? Right and wrong is subjective. There is no universal right and wrong. Things just are. If everything was universally right and wrong, it would be easy to just be like, oh, this person's doing this and this person's doing that. And we could say right and wrong and put them in categories. But that person who's doing what you might think is wrong thinks what they're doing is right. So you trying to change their mind is an insane idea. The only thing you do when you criticize someone else and complain about someone else in what you think they're doing is wrong, they just dig in deeper. They're just going to dig in even harder. Be like, no, I'm going to die on this hill, because that's just their mindset. That's how people are.
Right.
Either they're going to be like, hey, don't bother me anymore, or they're just going to sit and argue their point even harder.
I'm glad you brought I'm glad you brought self-righteousness into the equation here, because my example, now that I think about it, my example sounds extremely self-righteous. What I wanted to touch on was, because we're always trying to improve, right? This podcast is daily conditioning. We're always trying to improve. So I don't want to admit to our listeners that yes, but I should. We're all not perfect, right? I too complain. I complain a lot, but we're always trying to better ourselves. So Ash, what was that neuroscience? What was that word that you used 2 podcasts ago where we talked about the brain and the way that we build habits? What was that term that you used?
Servo mechanism. Is that what
say it again?
Servo mechanism. So
right.
when we're trying to do something, our servo mechanism is it's how we adapt by taking corrective action. So you play a sport. The first time you play basketball, you throw the ball, right? And you don't know really how to throw it. And then as you keep practicing, you start making the adjustments, start making the corrections. and then you kind of work on that, and then when you continually do that, and you continually get the feedback, your brain's getting feedback. All right, this works. I'm going to put my hand in this position. I'm going to put this. I'm going to use my legs, my back, my shoulders, my arms. You're not even thinking about all those mechanics, but you just know that you're contorting your body in a certain way, and eventually you keep doing that, and that develops a habit.
And it really builds that muscle memory you're talking about.
Exactly.
And so our listeners hear that word again, because I'm not going to pronounce it correctly. Can you say that one more time?
Servo mechanism.
All right. So with that being said, Dr. Vogely continues on and says almost the same thing and puts it in a way. Let me read this to you. It says, the human brain loves familiarity and efficiency. So what you feed your brain, it will settle for it and seek more of it. In other words, the more you complain, the more you make this the default mode of your brain's operation. So the more you continue to complain, you will continue to build that muscle memory. That's how I interpret it, or that statement. This is why I will never admit that I complain, because I want every listener to really continue to improve so that we build that muscle memory.
But here, I don't want to even say that. Listen, I complain too, but the thing is, my complaints are reactionary complaints. Guy cuts me off, it's going to be really hard for me to not, just totally ignore it. But the difference between me now and me a long time ago is I'm not carrying that shit with me all day long. I let it go. It might take me a 5 minutes. It might take me 5 seconds. It might take me maybe half an hour, depending on how egregious I believe the offense to be. But you let it go. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's not about, you're not trying to be inhuman. We're human beings. We're human beings. We're emotional creatures. Things happen to us. We're going to react, but don't let that reaction become your action. Don't let that reaction become you. React and then bring yourself back to who you truly are. And that's the point. Let those chemicals roll through and let it be. That's really the idea. What Dr. V was talking about there is neural programming. You're essentially the same way you learn. If you're doing a new task, however you form the habit, whatever that task is, the first time you do it, you're starting to create a new neural network in your brain. The more you practice it and the more you work on it, it starts to harden to the point where when you practice it long enough and do it long enough, it becomes hardwired in your brain. Now, the habits that you practice the most are the hardest wired, if you will, for lack of a better description. Okay. So that means those habits, and they become so automatic. All a habit is a programmed response to an external condition. That's all a habit is. So many habits that we have, which essentially is the same thing as a program, right? So many of the habits that we have, many people aren't even conscious that they're doing it. People don't understand, they don't even hear themselves speak half the time. I went to a bar, it wasn't recently, it was a while ago. There's not too many people hanging out nowadays, right? And you just sit at the bar and you just listen to people complain about stuff. Whether it's some mundane thing at their job, their spouse, their kids, something political. There's always something political. There's something on the news, something in TV. Like someone was just saying, "Oh, did you watch this last show of this TV show? I can't believe what they're doing. They stink. They're terrible. It wasn't as good as it was 20 some years ago." Like, man, why? Like but that's people want to complain and they want people to join their hate party. They love that when someone starts, chiming in. Because they're getting this mild, it feels like when they're blaming somebody else or complaining about something else, in their mind, it props them up. They're like, I'm not doing that stuff. These guys are stupid, or they're doing what they're doing. They don't deserve it. So that's kind of that's part of the mindset thing as well. That's the endorphin piece they get. I'm sorry.
I'm just, as you're talking, I'm in my head. I don't know if you remember. Did you watch The Simpsons ever?
Yeah. I stopped
as it rolled out. No, I mean this was long ago when I think Homer. He had an anger management issue, and I forgot what happened to him, but he stopped being angry, and he would develop these bumps behind his neck as something would happen to him. And what you're saying right now to me is sort of, I'm Homer. I am the guy who's not choosing to be human and just let the chemicals roll through. The real issue here is to let go. Homer, in this case, he was allowing himself to build all this pent up anger because he wasn't allowing himself to either letting go or into reacting a certain way. Did you ever watch that episode?
I don't remember if I did. I watched a lot of Simpsons episodes, but I don't really remember too many of them.
Oh, it was such a good episode. It was just I just remember this just now as you were talking. I was just like, that episode was pretty deep. But
I understand the concept though. Now, like you did allude to it. It's about letting it go,
right,
not holding on to the anger or the complaint and then just burying it inside and then going home and punching your wall or hitting your family member or kicking your dog. That's not a good way to vent either. The idea is to let it go because it doesn't affect you.
right,
Essentially, I say this all the time, but there's no it seems to be the proper answer for a lot of the stuff. Whenever you're letting an external condition control how you feel or affect your feeling, you're rendering your control to that external condition, whatever it is, whoever it is. Now, again, you could be justified in feeling the way you feel. It does not change the fact that it's not beneficial for you in the long run. The point I'm trying to make is if you have the thing, let it go. If you're still talking about the guy cutting you off last week and it's still in your craw that you're getting all upset about it and angry about it now and it's a week ago, it's done, it's gone. That guy doesn't even remember you. He doesn't care about you. He's not changing his ways. Don't let someone else's karma change your karma. Someone else cuts me off, that's their karma. If I'm going to act the way I want to act, I'm going to act according to my karma. I'm not going to react according to his. Thank you for listening to the Daily Conditioning Podcast. Please leave us your comments and remember, make growth your daily routine.